Hey, what's up guys, and welcome to a kind of video that I've never made before. So, in the comment section of every single one of my videos, it doesn't matter what kind of video it is, I usually get asked, how do I make what I make? Can you show us how you actually design these houses? So this is going to be the first of maybe a line of videos, it depends how you guys like this one, on how I actually design some of the houses that I make. This one is going to be featured mainly around wooden houses, but it can be applied to several other different types as well. So without any further ado, let me give you guys 5 building tips that I consider when I actually build my houses. Let's move on to the first one. 1. Framework. So the first tip that I can give you guys is consider how big you want the house. This first tip is going to be 100% focused around the frame. So I have 3 different frame sizes directly in front of us. This first one on the left here is a 5x6, so that's 5 up, 6 across. This second one here is 6 up, 7 across, and this largest one on the right is going to be 8 up and 9 across. This video is mainly going to feature the first one because it's the smallest and I've had to do a lot of building in this video, but the first thing that I always think about when I'm building a house is I figure out how big I want each section of the house to be, how big I want the walls to be. So most of the parts of this video, of which there are many, are going to feature the 5x6, but all of these rules can be applied to any one of the sizes of frame. Once I've figured out how big I want the house to be, I then have to shape it. And before we actually talk about the shaping process, I just want to show you guys how each one of these 3 frames look in their 3D form. So this first one on the left is the 5x6, this second one in the middle is the 6x7, and this largest one on the right is the 8x9. And the way that we've made these, we start with the frame size, so for instance this is 8 up, 9 across, and all we've done is we have extended the top 2 corners of the frame backwards, each by 9, and they have been connected to the ground. The middle one has been extended backwards by 7, and this first one has been extended backwards each by 6. You guys can see how this works. Let's move on to the actual shaping process of the houses. Okay, so once you've figured out how big you want each individual section of the house to be, I have went with the 5x6 frame, it's then time to figure out what configuration you want to use. So you can see that here we have a very small and simple configuration. We simply have 3 repeated sections of the 3D version of the 5x6 frame, and we have it kind of in an upside down L shape, like this. Very simple. If you want to have it bigger, we have the same thing here, except we have added a room in the very back left hand corner of the house. Equally so, if you wanted to add an entire second floor, so if you wanted to add an entire second floor to the frame, you definitely could, and it wouldn't be difficult. So if you wanted to do that, we just have to raise up these front blocks, and we have to connect them to the second floor. Then if we decide that we don't quite like that and we want to add an additional section on the front right hand part of the house, all we have to do is add another building block of the 5x6 frame on the front right hand corner. If we then decide that that isn't quite right, maybe we want to add another section on the front right hand side, all we have to do is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 and 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, or depending on the frame size you use, that might be 7 or it might be 9. You guys all know the numbers after you've figured it out, and you can really just personalize the house. That's just a very, very simple way of doing things. If you treat each one of these sections of the house like an individual Lego block, it's just easier to shape it and build it around the shape that you like. I personally think that that's terrible, so I'm going to revert those changes, and then I'm going to talk about the positioning of the roofs a little bit. Okay, so once you've figured out how you want the general shape of your house to go, I then find it best to figure out where the roofs are going to go. So in this case, you can see that we have one roof at the very top center part of the house, and we have one roof on the right. But that isn't the only way that we can have things. If we wanted to, we could simply have that one roof up at the top, in the back center part of the house. Or alternatively, we could have 3 roofs in total. We could have the one which is going to be right at the very front of the house, which is right here. This is where the entrance would be if I was going to make this house mine. I might have a roof here. I might add an additional roof on the right hand side, as I did previously before I completely destroyed it. And then maybe, what if I decided that I didn't want this roof on top here? Or maybe I do want it and I want it to face the completely opposite direction. So then what if I decide that I want the roof to go sideways instead of this way? All of these are options. You don't even have to have 3 if you don't want to. You could have no roof, or you could have flat roofs. They can face any direction they want to, and they can be any shape that you like. Personally, I don't want to have this. I like my original configuration, in which we have the roof right at the top, and we have the roof on the side. And I like this completely exposed here, and I want it to be a balcony. So I'm going to revert these changes, and that will actually be the first tip complete. That is everything centering around the framework of the house. 2. Patterns. Okay, tip number 2. How are we actually going to fill in the walls of the house? Well, I have 3 examples here. I have one for the 5x6, the 6x7, and the 8x9. Obviously, these aren't the only ways to do things, but I only wanted one example for each. As you can see, I think that each one of these particular configurations of how we can fill in the walls complement the size of the space that we actually have. This one in the left is very simple. It's simple because the house is incredibly small. Are there other options? There definitely are, but we're looking for a nice, good-looking, repeatable pattern that we can apply to every single one of the walls of the house. And obviously, as the walls get larger, and even larger, you can go for much more complicated patterns. So this being the 8x9, we can just go absolutely crazy, and I think that this looks quite nice. It's just a completely randomized pattern. I think it looks really good, but we're allowed to do that because we have way more space. If we try and do things like this to the first one, then it may not end so well. Let me give you guys another configuration that might work on the 5x6, simply because this is what we're going to be working with. So this is another option. Obviously, it's a little bit more difficult to do than the first configuration, but I think that it looks equally as nice. Personally, I prefer the first one, but if you want to go for something a bit more extravagant, maybe something a little bit more different, you might want to go for something like this, or possibly something completely different. The most important bit is that you're willing to repeat it and that it actually looks good and complements the house. And whilst that was quite a quick tip, that is really all I have for the second tip. Figure out what you want to put on each one of the walls, make sure that you like it, and make sure that it complements the house. So that is tip number 2. Why don't we move on to tip number 3? 3. Materials. Okay, tip number 3, materials. I know that this seems as though it should be the first tip on the list. Figure out what you want to make the house out of first, and then the rest will come. But I heavily believe that if you have a house that looks good in the shape that you like it, with the right configuration for the walls, a nice, lovely pattern, then it really doesn't matter what you make the house out of. All that matters is that the materials match each other. So, something to think about when you are actually building the house, once you've figured out the shape and once you've figured out the pattern of the house, is what you might want to actually make that out of. You'll find that it often doesn't matter as long as the first 2 are okay. So one of my favourite colour combinations is spruce wood and birch wood planks. If you're feeling a little crazy, you may also want to add some dark oak wood planks in there as well. Looks fantastic. Another configuration with wood that I found works very best with survival type houses and very simple looking houses is oak wood planks, oak wood, and some nice stone. Typically cobblestone, but you can use any variant, it all looks quite nice. Something that I don't use very often, but I think does look quite nice, especially if you're going for that look, is jungle wood and jungle planks. I believe they're called jungle planks. I haven't used them in so long. Yeah, they're just called jungle planks. Those are 3 color combinations which work quite nicely, but those aren't the only ones. All I'm suggesting is that make sure that the house is made out of materials that actually complement each other. Let me show you what happens when you make a house out of something which doesn't really look that good together. So here's an example of a house which has a pretty nice fundamental design, but has been made out of materials which really don't complement each other in the slightest. We have acacia, we have dark oak wood planks, we have acacia planks, and we have purple glass. Whilst the actual design of the house is quite good, and honestly, this house doesn't look that terrible because of it. It could look a lot better with just a simple change of materials, which you guys will see later. So, all I'm suggesting is that when you decide what you want to make your house of, make sure that the actual materials do go well together. And that concludes tip number 3. 4. Roofs. Okay, tip number 4, the actual roofs of the house. We've talked about placements, but we haven't talked about the designs of the roofs. So why don't we do that? Let me show you a couple of different examples. So a lot of people, when they first start Minecraft, me included, they begin building roofs in the same shape as a roof, as you would expect, but they usually just use, and like I said, me included when I first started, just like regular square blocks to kind of like shape the roof, which can look good actually on some houses, my Christmas houses included, but in most cases this just doesn't look very good, does it? So even a small change of changing those square blocks into stairs can make a world of difference. You can see that this opposite half of the roof just looks quite a lot better in just about every single way. Not only have we used birch wood stairs here, but we have also made them overhang the front of the roof by 1 row, which kind of just adds that extra layer. Plus we've done upside down birchwood stairs underneath the overhanging layer just to make it shape up a little bit better, just to kind of like smooth things off rather than having this sort of pattern, which I'm not a fan of. Looks a lot better with the upside down layer. And if you want to take it a further level still, here we have on the right hand side an example of what I think is a perfect looking roof. So we have the overhanging layer, we have the upside down stairs underneath the overhanging layer, we have a nice little accent right at the top of the roof, we have slabs going up the center of the roof, we also have the stairs rather than the square blocks, and as you guys can see, we've also got a 2-tone roof, which kind of just shows you where it begins and ends a little bit better, and in my opinion, looks a whole lot nicer. This really applies to wooden houses a lot more than I would say like brick or stone houses, where I think that when you're building those out of like brick and stone bricks, a lot of the times roofs in those cases I think look just better with one kind of material for the roof, but wooden houses, you can definitely capitalize on it and it looks a little bit better. So that is how a roof would look if I built a house, and I think that it looks fantastic, and obviously that can adapt to any shape roof you like. But if for some reason you don't want to use that shape of roof, still using the exact same principles just in a different shape, you can turn what would be a regular boring square roof that you guys can see we have up here, you can turn it into something which actually looks quite nice. So you do have the option when doing a square roof to either use like square blocks and build them up exactly in the same manner, or you can use stairs as I have here, you can layer them up in the same way, and you can go for the 2-tone effect as well. So here for the very first layer we have the dark oak, and then we build it up with the birch, and when we get to the very top here we have a dark oak wood slab right at the top center, and that looks just a little bit better than if we would have built it, let's say, out of just regular birchwood planks. So no matter the shape, if you shuffle things around a little bit, it just looks so much better. Those are a couple of different types of roof. Square and the regular type of roof here are the most common for me. I personally prefer these over square roofs any day, but that's completely up to you. So also think about the shape and the material of the roof when you actually build them, and that all goes together with the materials, the framework, and the patterning of the house. And once you've put all of those things together, guys, let me show you what you end up with. So after you've figured out the frame, the shape, the patterning of the walls, the materials that you've made it out of, and the actual roofs of the house, you end up with something that may potentially look a little bit like this. And doesn't this look fantastic, guys? This is a nice, very, very simple house. Once you get proficient at making things like this will take you way less than 10 minutes. It probably takes you anywhere between 6 and 8 minutes to put together. This doesn't take much time whatsoever, and it looks absolutely fantastic in my opinion. That is the actual structure of the house. Those 4 things that we've learned combine together to make something like this, or something more tailored to you. Something bigger perhaps, something completely different shaped. It's up to you. Just use those 4 principles to make something like this. But for the actual outside appearance of the house, we are missing one vital thing. The actual exterior. The garden, any accessories that we may want to add to it that would complement it. And that leads us on to tip number 5. Exterior. There are 4 things that I think about when designing an exterior to the house. The first thing that I always consider is a path which goes all the way around it. For whatever reason, I prefer it when there is a path that goes all the way around the outside of the house. I think the reason being is because it gives you a chance to connect the front of the house to the back of the house and just connect the house together and make it flow into one shape. As you can see, for the entrance of the house and for the path, we've kind of taken the materials that we have for the inside and the materials of the house itself, and we've kind of extended them to the outside of the house. This complements it, it reinforces the shape of the house, and it actually makes it so that it's actually a little bit more functional. I think that makes it a lot better. So you can see that we have taken the spruce wood of the house, and we have taken the stone bricks which we have used for the interior ground floor of the house, and we've taken those two and we've made a nice looking path which goes all the way around the house and also extends out in front of it. It doesn't matter what these 2 materials are. If we had made the entrance out of oak wood planks, we would have used oak wood. If we would have made the interior ground floor out of, let's say, sand, then we would have used sand. It would have made it look a lot better. Complement the actual materials with the path and complement the shape of the house. You can see that the path goes all the way around the house in a square fashion. The reason that I think this looks good is because it sticks to the shape of the house and we haven't went a little crazy and we don't have a random path that kind of squiggles around in random directions. And that's tip number 1 with the exterior. Tip number 2. Accessories. These can come in many shapes and sizes. So by accessories, I mean things that aren't really a part of the house, they're not really needed, they're not necessary, but they can be added to either meld the shape or just add something interesting onto the house. For instance, this pool that we have on the front right hand corner of the house. The reason that I like it is actually twofold. Number 1, it makes the house a nice square shape. It makes it so that the path is It's just a much more pleasing to the eye shape. If the path had like folded inwards around here, pretend the pool wasn't there, if the path had folded inwards into kind of like a 90-degree inverse angle that we have here, it just wouldn't look as nice as if it was a nice big square shape. So the path not only added something interesting onto the house, but it also shaped it. Not only could we have added a pool here, but we could have also added a well, we could have added an outside seating area. As long as it shaped the house in a square like this, as long as it added an angle which complemented the house, it really didn't matter what it really wouldn't matter what we put there. It could have been anything. But I think that a pool is nice because it doesn't cover up the house, it adds an extra layer of colour, and that feeds directly into tip number 3 for my exteriors of the house. Colour. The reason that we have these roses going all the way around the outside of the house, and they do go all the way around the outside, is because they add a nice, bright, vibrant, different colour to the house. Did we need these? No, we didn't, but they're a very nice separation to the dull browns and greys that we have for the house. They complement it heavily. Not only do we have the nice blue of the pond, or pool, whatever you want to call it. I like to think of it more as a pond. I probably wouldn't want to go swimming in there. Not only do we have the nice red of the flowers, but we also have the nice green of the jungle leaves going around the house. So it adds a little bit of colour to some of the more dull tones of the house. I think that it brightens it up quite nicely. Now, not only do we have the hedge for the nice green part of it, but it also just reinforces what is going to be the 4th tip for building an exterior: the border of the house. I personally like it when I know where a house begins and ends. It reinforces the shape for me, and I like it a lot more. Can you just have this without the hedge? Can you just like leave it in the middle of nowhere? You could. You honestly could. It really wouldn't matter. But I personally like the aesthetic, along with the fact that it's green, it adds extra colour. I like the fact that the house begins and ends with the hedge. I like the fact that it complements the shape of the house and therefore complements the shape of everything. Everything just it flows together. It's got the colour, it adds the border, it adds to the shape, it adds to the entire house. And that is the last tip. That is tip number 5. This is what you may end up with if you guys follow my 5 tips. Focus on the frame, the actual shape of the house, the materials. Focus on what you want the roof to look like, what the walls look like, and focus on an exterior which actually complements the house. And all in all, if you were to do this, and if you also did what I did, which is like dig out the entire ground floor of the house here, threw some stone bricks in, also made it so that the house was functional so that you can actually walk around it if you so choose. If you get proficient enough at all of those things, you can then build a house which looks like this, or something that's a little bit more tailored to you. You can probably get this done in less than 20 or so minutes. Even less if you have a friend help you dig out all around the house. And there concludes my 5 wooden house building tips. Hopefully you guys have liked that, hopefully you've enjoyed it, and hopefully it's actually helped you in some way, shape or form. If not actually help you build some better looking, some more aesthetic looking houses, hopefully it's given you guys a little bit of insight into what I think about when I actually design the houses. So if this has helped you in any way, shape or form, guys, I would really appreciate it if you gave this video a like, a favourite, a share, and feel free to comment down below. I do actually have more tips for building wooden houses, among different types of houses as well, and buildings in general, but I'm not entirely sure whether you guys would want to see those, so I haven't made the videos yet, I've not even planned them out. If you guys like this video, if you share it, if you leave me comments down below letting me know, either way, if you like this type of video, then I know whether to make more or whether not to bother. So if you wouldn't mind, like, favourite, share, and maybe I'll put together some more videos like this, different types of houses, more tips, and maybe some different builds in general. Thank you very much for watching, guys. Like, favourite, share, and I'll see you in the next video.